If you've missed a mortgage payment or can't catch up after your forbearance, or for any other reason you're worried about a foreclosure, or you've received the notice of intent to foreclose from the bank's attorney, you want to know, what is the foreclosure process in New Jersey? How long does the foreclosure process take? And really the reason you're watching this video is, how do I stop it? Or how do I deal with the foreclosure? And how do I use the New Jersey rules to my benefit? I'm going to walk you through every step of the foreclosure process and answer all those questions. The first step in the foreclosure process for a plaintiff, meaning the bank, the hedge fund, whoever is owning your mortgage loan, the first step that they have to take is they have to give you a notice of intent to foreclose that tells you who owns the loan, who's the servicer on the loan, that means the company that collects your monthly mortgage payments, how much you owe, and how many months you're behind, and some other information. But that's the core key information. And that's incredibly important information to have. That notice is required because after the Great Recession, when foreclosures were going bananas again, the legislature in New Jersey stepped forward and said, wait a second, you can't just run in and take people's houses without telling them who owns the loan. That's got to be part of the process. And so that's why that rule is in place, and it's important because the notice of intent to foreclose gives you a lot of information, gives you a lot of power if you know how to use it. So when you get that notice of intent to foreclose, read it. Make sure there aren't any mistakes. If you get served with a foreclosure complaint, answer the complaint. If you do not answer that complaint, you are giving the bank your house in about 7 months. If you do answer the complaint, you are opening up massive, massive opportunity to fight, to save, to rescue your home. That's the fact. One other fact, 90% plus of people in foreclosure don't answer the complaint. Do not be that statistic. If you defend a foreclosure case in any degree of skill and effort, you're going to have a year. It's hard for lawyers to say things like that, but you're going to have a year, especially during this time when we're coming back from the courts being closed for almost a year. But you're going to have a year if you properly defend a foreclosure case and do things the right way and attack every stage that you have a right to attack and defend everything you have a right to defend. It'll be a year. And I hope that brings some peace during this difficult time because it's a year of planning, preparation, and fighting. So answering the foreclosure complaint, defending the case, got to do that. How to defend the case. That's where the real expertise and talent comes in. There's a science and there's an art to defending a foreclosure case. The science of it is, look, as attorneys, we know how to send discovery demands and how to respond to discovery demands and all that kind of stuff. We know that. That's just things that have to happen. You have to do them. You have to do them the same way every time. But exactly what to ask, what to look for, how to make, when to make certain arguments, when to make certain issues of new law that the courts haven't addressed yet, that's the art of it. And that's why when you're defending a foreclosure case, you're protecting your home and your family. You don't want to go into this unrepresented, and you don't want to go into this represented by the wrong attorney. Mortgage servicing companies, the companies that collect money for the mortgage loan owners, they make mistakes. A lot. All the time. And when they make a mistake, you have rights under a federal law known as the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, or RESPA. Now, this is not a RESPA video. That would be an extraordinarily long video. But it is a process of foreclosure video. And RESPA is a key part of the process. It goes into the art side of the fight. You can force the bank to give you all kinds of information about their mortgage servicing so you can find out what mistakes they've made, pounce on those mistakes, develop a RESPA case, and potentially in a separate court, even as you're defending the foreclosure, sue the bank and maybe even their attorneys. That creates what is known as a mess. And that's one of the ways that you win foreclosure cases. And it comes from answering the complaint, defending the foreclosure, and figuring out the best way to attack the bank. So let's put a time frame on the RESPA dispute. Let's say if you don't bring a RESPA argument, then your discovery process will last 2 to 3 months. If you go through the RESPA analysis, you're probably adding another 2 months to the process. and maybe quite a bit longer. In the normal course of a foreclosure case that the bank is proceeding on, at some point the bank's going to file with the court something called a motion for summary judgment. And that is the bank saying to the judge, look, judge, my client, I own the mortgage and I should be allowed to come to court to try to make them pay me or me take their house. So it's just a question at that stage as to whether the bank owns the mortgage. And most of the time, despite what you're going to read on the internet as secret outs because the bank doesn't really own the mortgage and, the lost note and that kind of stuff, no. Most of the time, the bank does, or the hedge fund or the plaintiff does own the mortgage. Not always, and you should always double check, but most of the time they do. And so you need to defend it. But after the summary judgment motion order is entered, if it's entered, that's not the end of the game. The next step is the bank trying to set up a motion to apply for final judgment by foreclosure. And the final judgment of foreclosure is where the bank says to the clerk of the court, hey, clerk, I own the mortgage. I've got the summary judgment motion order. Now I'm going to show you that borrower owes me all this money, and this is exactly all the money that the borrower owes me. And if you think that the banks make a lot of mistakes during this process, you will be correct. And that's part of where the RESPA investigation and process comes in. Because if you've gone through the RESPA investigation, you have all the bank's files, you have all your client's files, you know where the client thinks there was a problem, you've identified the problem by pursuing the wrong number. At the time of final judgment, the bank has created a big problem. And again, this is a process case, process video. And you want to know how much time you have. So in the ordinary course, you probably have 2 months from the issuance of the notice to you that they're going to apply for final judgment to the final judgment being entered. In a situation in which there's a legitimate fight over the final judgment and you're going to contest it and have legitimate arguments created, then I can't even tell you how long the final judgment is going to take, because it could take an infinite amount of time, depending on the number of mistakes and how effective you can be at pushing your rights either in the foreclosure court or in a separate suit against the bank for messing up your rights after final judgment. Bank has a right to try to list your house for sale. However, there's a process to this. And there's 6 weeks of notifications that have to be sent out. And after the 6 weeks of notifications are out, the bank has to send your foreclosure case to the sheriff, who's got a stack of foreclosure sales this big, and yours goes under the bottom one. How long did the sheriff sale? Oh, I got to tell you, God only knows. Right now, there's no way for me to tell you how long it is going to be for the sheriff's sale. Nobody knows. The courts don't know. The sheriffs don't know. The plaintiff's attorneys don't know. The mortgage servicers don't know. I don't know. None of my colleagues know. Nobody knows. It's a long time. At one point during the Great Recession, this is just going back to war stories in 2008, 9, 10, there was a year in a couple of the counties. Now, that got cleared up at one point real fast, went from a year to 6 weeks. So it's really hard to say how long the sheriff's sale takes, but it's a process. It takes time. Bottom line, you have rights. And if you don't answer the complaint, you're not exercising those rights, and you're giving up massive opportunity to fight this bank, especially if you know or think the bank has made a mistake and done something wrong. And then you really need to look into things. And I'm happy to help, as are other colleagues around the state. Do not go unrepresented to the foreclosure court.